Jisreen. Also, there are some advances happening between Harasta and Erbin, which are also two militant-held parts and quarters in Eastern Ghouta. The army aims to reach Al Uthman Mosque in Erbin in order to secure further the perimeter of the area over there, particularly around the Syrian army's vehicles management base, which the terrorists are also trying to reach in order to foil the Syrian army's advances there and perhaps prevent the army from strengthening its positions around the main route that cut the Eastern Ghouta in half and led, of course, to dividing the terrorist strongholds and main towns and villages that they control in Eastern Ghouta. Of course, this is in parallel with the exit of a number of civilians from Eastern Ghouta, particularly through the Al-Wafidin camp. The Al-Wafidin camp, which is on the outskirts of Eastern Ghouta near Douma. Just about an hour ago, a batch of civilians were able to get out for the first time in a large number following, of course, the establishment of this corridor on the 27th of last month. So there are two tracks the Syrian army is working on, the humanitarian track and the military track. And over here on the military level, the Syrian army is carrying out lots and lots of military operations, and there are so many significant advances that led finally yesterday to dividing Eastern Ghouta into three areas. Three areas, each includes several several towns and villages controlled by the militants, but now the army has those areas under a tight siege. For example, Douma and the Rihan farms is under siege by the Syrian army. Harasta itself is also under the siege of the Syrian army, and the southern part of Eastern Ghouta, where the villages and towns just in front of you in the camera, Jisreen, Kafar Batna, Hazze, Ain Tarma, and Zamalka are also under a siege by the army. The army has encircled those areas and is now starting its military operations, perhaps in order to advance towards those quarters, those residential areas that terrorists occupy and use as strongholds. We have to wait and see what will happen, especially that the Russians have been saying, Moscow has said just today that it is ready perhaps to consider the ceasefire in Eastern Ghouta, and also at the same time that Moscow will respond if there was any US attack on Damascus. So the issue actually here, the developments are getting complicated with such statements, but for the Syrian army on the ground, the army is advancing every hour. The army is carrying out its regular military operations against terrorists while trying to get the civilians out. Nothing on the ground has changed yet, but there are those strong statements coming out from Moscow.
Very well, Mohammed. We'll leave there at that. But of course, as always, we do appreciate your very brave reporting for us from on the ground there in Eastern Ghouta. That was Mohammed Ali, Press TV's correspondent, speaking to us live there from Syria's Eastern Ghouta, talking about, of course, the army's advances. We'll keep a very close eye on that developing story.